This is a beginning point. This is the beginning of the rest of my life. I got the meaning, and I got to write it down, because I don't want to forget it.
Just win, baby.
And welcome back to the Gold Jacket podcast, proudly sponsored by Monkey Knife Fight, where you can find the very best player props and team props on game day. You make sure you use the promo code TNFF to get a up to 50% match on $50 match on your first deposit. I am your host tonight, Connor Donald. As you can see, Jim is not with us, sadly, tonight. He could not make it, but he'll definitely, hopefully, be back next week. You can find me on Twitter at Connor10, and you can always find Jim on Twitter at GoldJacketQBs as well. We are proud members of the True North Fantasy Football Network. Make sure to check out the entire network on Twitter at True North FFB, YouTube. Subscribe at TNFF Network, on the internet, TrueNorthFFB.com, and on our newest platform, Instagram, TrueNorthFFB. You can also look right above Aaron's head for all the places you can find us as well. And you can find articles, rankings, podcast streams, and so much more, including our 5 nights a week of live streams for all 18 weeks of the NFL season. Starting, I think a lot of them are starting this week, so keep your eyes out for those ones. This week, we're finishing up our 8 weeks of training camp visits by heading up north in the NFC to talk the Green Bay Packers, Chicago Bears, Minnesota Vikings, and Detroit Lions. As always, we're diving into the 4 key fantasy positions and giving you our personal takes on the situation for your fantasy assets for season-long dynasty, and wrapping it up by giving you our choices for gold and fool's gold as always. As you can see, I am joined tonight by a very special guest. He is a staff writer for the world-famous Fantasy Footballers. He's a member of Team Rise or Fall. He's also a Fantasy Pros contributor. That is Aaron Larson. You can find him at Twitter, AA Larson, LARSON. You can also find his tag there right below him. Aaron, how's it going? And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. Excited to do this.
Definitely. It's been a pretty crazy day. I also run the Twitter feed for True North, and I also run the Twitter feed for my Philadelphia Eagles show, Kelly Green Hour. So keeping up with all the roster cuts. It's been a pretty chaotic day, but the day is over. But the week is just beginning, of course, because waivers tomorrow and all that fun stuff. So we could have a whole lot more fantasy stuff to talk about in the coming 24 to 48 hours. But for now, we're going to kick it off with the quarterback room, the most important position in fantasy football, arguably. We'll start in Green Bay. Since you're a Green Bay Packers fan, what better way to do it than start with the biggest soap opera of the offseason, the Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay Packers show. It finally concluded, and Green Bay came out the winner for now, getting back their franchise quarterback for apparently one more shot. Since 2008, Aaron Rodgers has finished as a top 10 QB every season, but 2 in which he played 7 and 9 games. Plus, he's been top 3 in 8 of the last 12 seasons. Somehow, he is never drafted as such due to his age. Despite that, it looks as though, including this year, there should be at least 3 years left in his career. There could be expected regression next season after a historic 48 touchdown season, which was the most in his career, a 71% completion percentage, the best of his career, and the best of his career 121.5 quarterback rating. He's exceeded his fantasy points over expectation for the last 12 straight seasons, ranking top 5 in that category in 8 of those seasons. Do you think Aaron Rodgers is being disrespected as he's never seemingly drafted at where his finishes have been? And even though there's likely only 2 or 3 years left, is it a cheap, worthwhile investment in your opinion?
Yeah, so as far as where he's being taken in fantasy drafts, I actually think he's being respected right about where he should be. Rewind a year ago, and I think that's where he was being disrespected. I think he was outside the top 10, maybe top 12, 13 fantasy quarterbacks last year because there was all the fears of the LaFleur offense and all this stuff going on. And then he came out and lit the world on fire with that all those numbers you just laid out, how great his MVP season was. But I think it's just hard right now to leapfrog into those elite tier of fantasy quarterbacks, right? So, like the way I draft, I'm probably not going to have Aaron Rodgers on any rosters because, I'm okay taking those top guys, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, those guys that can do it on the ground. But once you get past that tier, I'm good just waiting for that the last tier of usable fantasy quarterbacks. Rodgers being right in the middle, I think that regression is coming, right? I mean, historic season last year was great, but it's a small step backwards. And I think he's fine where he's going, but the way I draft, I'm not getting him.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You know, I always look for like at least some semblance of mobility, and you really don't get that with Aaron Rodgers because we know that the more mobility there is, the higher upside that there is to hit ceilings. He relies on, touchdowns. He relies on high completion percentages, lots of yardage to achieve the direction that he's going in fantasy football. And I think that there is, the expected regression. He's still an MVP caliber quarterback. He's still a Hall of Fame quarterback. Like, you can't deny those types of things. But at the end of the day, there is the expectation that, you are only going to get 2 years out of him, maybe 3 years out of him. Maybe the drama continues year after year and you don't know how many years you're going to get out of him. Who knows? But at the end of the day, him and Tom Brady, they may be just at the right tier of, expectation and respect at this point based on their age and the fact that some of these seasons have been major outliers. Even for Tom Brady last season was a bit of an outlier with how much yardage he was able to put up, and some of his numbers were just astronomical.
I think it was like the second best touchdown percentage of Brady's career last year too, and it was Rodgers' best. I mean, that's the number you look at that's hard to maintain.
Absolutely. And like Tom Brady was number 2 in deep throws. Like that's rare to see because we didn't see that much in New England and with the weapons that he had in Tampa. So I definitely agree with you on that front that he is probably being going where he should be going, but there is the likelihood that he actually beats those expectations with his final finish of the season because that's just Aaron Rodgers. Right. But you don't want to be that guy who's drafting Aaron Rodgers ahead of the likes of, Dak Prescott or Kyler Murray or some of the guys who are going in that ballpark. You don't want to be that guy who's going and grabbing them. So definitely good points on Aaron Rodgers there. Next, we'll move over to Chicago. What a fun place that is. If you're a fantasy owner, Matt Nagy has you pounding your head off the nearest wall all offseason, sticking with Andy Dalton almost at all costs, despite the Justin Fields' awesome preseason showing. Chicago struggled over the last couple seasons under the arm of Mitch Trubisky, and it feels like Nagy is just trying to extend his life as a head coach of an underperforming Bears team by playing Dalton over Fields. What do you think of Justin? When do you think Justin Fields will play? And do you think he will live up to his current startup ADP of QB 10, which I've taken from RotoViz FFPC? So obviously right now he's going as the QB 10. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, I think he's close to that. That's tough in Dynasty right away being QB 10, but his ceiling is higher than that. As far as when he's going to play, trying to get inside Matt Nagy's head is tough to do. He is adamant about week 1, so it definitely sounds like week 1 is going to be, against that Rams primetime game. That might be a massacre, but maybe the Bears hold their own. Looking at their schedule, week 2 they play the Bengals. Tell me they're not going to let Andy Dalton have a revenge game against the Bengals in week 2. And then, looking ahead, they have the Browns, the Bears, the Raiders. Oh, the Bears, sorry. The Lions and the Raiders. So some tough teams in there with the Rams and the Browns, but they could potentially be 3-2 after 5 weeks. That's not great, But that's enough for a coach like Matt Nagy to say, well, we're going to keep rolling with Andy Dalton. So I really like Fields' upside, his running ability, all that. But if I'm drafting him in a redraft league, you got to have a backup plan to start the season.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I mean, if you're going to go with them, I mean, the expectation usually is by a bye week, or if Andy Dalton is severely underperforming, which what is severely underperforming to Matt Nagy is a whole different idea, like you said, to try and get inside his head, because obviously we've seen in the past with Mitch Trubisky, who's been up and down and all around and underperforming here, there, and everywhere, that you never know how long Andy Dalton might have the job. So we'll definitely see how things go. But I agree with you. You got to expect the first 2 weeks, especially that with that revenge game that might happen for Andy Dalton. Justin Fields, for me, that's definitely rich. It's definitely rich to think of a QB 10 before even taking a snap in the NFL. But I understand that you have to kind of take those risks and take those chances because you just never know what's going to happen. But the turnover of QB, it happens all the time. But the opportunity to get a guy with this mobility and in this situation where he can likely take the franchise QB opportunity by the balls and run with it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he has all the tools you want in that, he is one of the most athletic quarterbacks already in the NFL, but he can throw the ball too. He's not just the run around, scramble, chuck it deep. He's got a good arm and he's an accurate thrower. Yeah,
I mean, there are some things, that there are some things that people worry about with him, but you never know what might happen. And the deadly chart of the success rate of Ohio State quarterbacks that's been showing up all over the internet. You never know, but you can't go off of that. You have to expect that some of these quarterbacks are going to be different or potentially be outliers. And you never know. Justin Fields could be one of those, especially with his mobility. You can't just disrespect those aspects that we love in fantasy football quarterbacks just because of past history out of school and their success when they come to the NFL and stuff. So I definitely agree with you there. And he's got some good weapons. He's got David Montgomery, Tariq Cohen, who's on the PUP list, but hopefully he'll get back to it. He's got a young tight end in Cole Kmet, an old tight end in Jimmy Graham. He's got Mooney. He's got Robinson.
Oh, Robinson. I mean, just burying the lead there. He is, and we'll probably talk about him later, but he's one of the most consistent receivers in the NFL, despite never having any quarterback to play with, to speak of.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. So there's so much there. It's all about Matt Nagy giving him the opportunity to actually step in and get that job. Next up, we'll head over to Minnesota. Kirk Cousins' per game rank over the last 3 seasons has been 13, 18, and 14 in PPR. Although he's been exceeding his expected fantasy points over the last few seasons, he lacks that mobility and is on a run-focused offense that ran the ball on 48 and 51% of plays over the last 2 seasons. He is, however, a seemingly safe play, as 47% of his games over the last 3 years, he's been a top 12 quarterback, and 38% as a top 24 quarterback, and has only produced less than 10 points 2 times over the last 3 years. However, in a quarter of his games, he's also produced 15 or less. Are you drafting Kirk Cousins confidently as your QB2? Does the future concern you at all as Minnesota likely comes to the end of the line with Cousins after the 2022-2023 season when his contract ends?
Yeah, so as far as drafting him in redraft as my quarterback too, this kind of leads off of what we just talked about with Justin Fields. But if I'm going with Justin Fields or Trey Lance, Kirk Cousins is one of those candidates that I'm going to go ahead and feel good about until these rookies take over, because he's got a pretty good opening schedule. I think they play Cincinnati week 1. And, all those numbers you rattled off, like he is your steady, stable fantasy quarterback that might not win you many weeks, but probably isn't going to lose you any weeks either. So I think he is that great, just kind of, seat warmer until the rookies get ready. That's a great strategy I've been seeing this year, is getting those 2 types of players, and Cousins is perfect for that. I think you're right. His contract coming to the end in a couple of years here, and Minnesota drafting Kellen Mond, that's sort of signaling right away that they want to at least be preparing for the future and getting ready for that. And Cousins has always been a guy that's, in my eyes, a little better than average, but he's never been one of those elite tier guys.
No, I mean, he definitely leans on his weapons. You look at Dalvin Cook, you looked at some of the tight ends in the past, you look at Justin Jefferson last season and Adam Thielen that we'll get into later in the show. Though he leans on those weapons to produce a lot for him. And I think that, like he falls in that ballpark of, Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, those guys who aren't sexy, but, they work as your QB2. They work, if you're in Superflex, they might work as your QB3. You might be able to lean on them when you need them, but they're definitely not someone you're taking as your QB1 or drafting with any sort of confidence to be any more than just potentially a safe play that you can plug and play every week. And every fourth or fifth game, Kirk Cousins may fall off a cliff a little bit for you, but you take those risks with any quarterback.
Yeah,
so
you're not excited to draft him. You're not excited to put him in your lineup, but he'll produce good enough.
Exactly. No, definitely agree on that point. And like you said, the idea that, even though Kellen Mond was drafted late, the idea that they're thinking, they're drafting quarterbacks even to be backups and they're young. They're not going with the veteran style like, the Eagles where they got Joe Flacco. Obviously, they got Minshew now, but, you go with Joe Flacco. You go with that like Nick Foles in Chicago right now. You look at that, you feel a lot safer. But when there's a guy like Kellen Mond or you're drafting some of these players, suddenly things get a little more different, a little more interesting because, the team's thinking about the future. So definitely something to keep in mind to watch how he performs and what the team does. But he is safe for the next 2 years because all of his money is fully guaranteed, of course. Detroit, the final stop here. Oh boy, here we go. Matt Stafford literally broke his back for the constantly rebuilding Detroit Lions franchise. And now in comes Sean McVay's robot, Jared Goff. Do you think Goff is the long-term answer in Detroit, enough to invest in him in fantasy? The game script should be as negative as can be. Does that pique your interest at all, knowing they will be going to the air a lot?
Not really. I mean, I don't think he's the long-term. I think that they got somebody they can kind of start the rebuilding process with. But would not be shocking at all to see them drafting a quarterback in the very near future again here. And yeah, even in redraft, there's a negative game script, but it's hard to, if he's behind, what's to say he's not going to throw 2 or 3 picks and 1 touchdown, and how much does that really help your game? So the bigger problem too, as far as that goes, is he's got a tight end that I like a lot in Hawkinson and a running back that can catch the ball, but his wide receiver options are just a whole mess of question marks, So I know they already released Perryman and Tyrell Williams, Quintez Cephas. I mean, not much to get excited about there for him as receiving options.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, for me, I think about it like this. You're going to throw the football and somebody's going to have to catch it eventually. Obviously, when we compare to the Jameis Winston situation, you're thinking, but Jameis Winston had weapons. Jameis Winston had people who can actually catch a football. But in this situation, if you're going to the air over 500 times, you're bound to make some things happen, but you're also bound to potentially make a lot of mistakes. So yeah. I do think in this situation, I would more lean on wanting to own the weapons. Like you said, we're going to get into how cheap the wide receivers are later. We're going to get into Hawkinson in a bit, and we're going to get into Swift and Williams in a bit as well. But you just naming off those weapons and some of the ADPs and prices that come with them, some of them are almost free for you. And
I do think Goff, like as gross as it is, he is going to throw the ball a lot. He's going to have some good games, but going on that roller coaster ride of the season is just not a ride I don't think I want to do.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't going to be willing to take that ride, and some may take him as their QB3 or whatever, maybe take him in the ballpark of Sam Darnold, Taysom Hill, Jameis Winston before that battle finished and stuff, deep in the 20s. Looking there, like maybe just take the shot in the dark. But yeah, I think if we can say it, Jared Goff's better days are behind him, if we can even call his better days. But now gold and fool's gold, of course, gold is people who we think will outperform their ADP. Fool's gold being someone who you may be fooled into thinking they're a good value, but they may not perform to their ADP. My gold in this division is going to be Justin Fields. I think, the mobility's there, the opportunity's there. You do have to be concerned somewhat about what happens if Nagy and Pace get fired and a new regime comes in and stuff. Will they see Justin Fields as the answer and stuff? But I do think he's a guy that's gold here. He's the one with the safest bet, the safest opportunity. My fool's gold is probably going to have to be Jared Goff, because I just don't, like you said, you gave some pretty good points about the wide receivers, the situation. They're going to have some high draft picks, I think, over the next couple seasons, continuing to rebuild and work to build this team up. And who's to say one of those high picks isn't someone to just completely replace Jared Goff outright? Who knows? I didn't look into the contract situation, but maybe there might even be an opportunity to actually get out from under Jared Goff after a little bit, but he is under a fresh new contract, so that would be tough to say. But that's how I would lean in this area. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with you with your pick for gold there with Fields. Like we said, he's got every tool possible, and it's just a matter of when he gets on the field. And that's sooner than later. He is going to massively outperform where he's being drafted right now, just because it's tough to draft someone that's not a starter. As soon as that flip gets switched, though, he should be a must-start quarterback every week, just with his all-around game. As far as fool's gold, I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins on this one. Jared Goff, he's not even being drafted in a lot of leagues right now, so I don't think there's a lot of expectation for him. But I have heard people that have been really confident in taking Cousins as their one quarterback and thinking they're going to be good with him for the season. And again, maybe you'll be okay. I think he might have set his career record for touchdown passes last season too. So just, not expecting to have that exact same performance. Jefferson, Thielen, great weapons. But again, you mentioned Minnesota wants to ground and pound the ball in that offense if they can. So Kirk Cousins is a guy that I think will underperform where he's currently being at the end of the season ranks.
I can definitely see that. I can definitely get behind that. And I see it with Jared Goff. I think my expectations are just so damn low that I can't even wrap my head around how you could draft Jared Goff. And like you said, some people aren't even. Some leagues, you aren't even seeing him go. So that would probably be one QB leagues. But yeah, in super flex leagues, you'd probably be like a third, maybe even a fourth option on some teams. We'll move into the second, sometimes arguably the most important position, also the running back room. We'll start in Green Bay. Aaron Jones got a brand new contract and is now coming off back-to-back top 5 finishes, including 5th last year despite missing 2 games. He's coming off back-to-back 60 target seasons, 200-plus attempt seasons, and 1,400 all-purpose yard seasons. A.J. Dillon has drawn some hype over the offseason, but it feels like a potential trap due to his limitations in the passing game. Despite Jamal Williams now out of the picture, Dillon doesn't seem a shoo-in to just eat his 119 attempts and 35 targets. Without the passing game work, what are your thoughts on Dillon and having to invest in him at RB29? And also, is Jones being underappreciated again, or does the uncertainty at QB warrant his level of respect in the community?
Yeah, so starting off with Aaron Jones, you mentioned those back-to-back top 5 finishes, and that might be a little bit, tough to project. But if he stays healthy all season, or even the majority of the season, I don't see how he doesn't finish as a top 10 or maybe top 5 again. With Jamal Williams being in Detroit now, Jones is going to get more work in the passing game. He might not get more total work, right, if Dillon comes in and steals some carries, but Jones was a guy, he was always out during those 2-minute drills. That's when Jamal Williams would come in. You got to think that Jones is going to get that this year. Aaron Rodgers, we talked about, probably not scoring or throwing 48 touchdown passes again, but the Packers should be a good offense, so maybe Jones gets a couple more on the ground. We saw him get double-digit in the teens in touchdowns 2 years ago. So a season like that is definitely possible. I've got Aaron Jones, I think, as my running back 6 overall. I think he is definitely worth a first round pick. As far as Dillon, I think you said RB29 right now, and that's something that I can't draft him there as a, in that upper top 30 running back range. he'll be fine. He'll probably have a couple big games. I don't know exactly how the Packers are going to use him and deploy him. And honestly, one thing, you mentioned I am a Packer fan. I've watched most of the preseason games and following it and stuff. And this Kylan Hill guy, he has been impressive in the preseason. Like, I think he's going to find his way on the field. And that might actually, those aren't going to be Aaron Jones snaps he's taking. Those are probably going to be some of Dillon's snaps. So A.J. Dillon, unless he really free falls, I'm not getting him in any drafts right now.
Yeah, I got to say, I loved Kylan Hill through the process. I watched a bit of film. I actually had him ranked 5th on my rookie running backs, ahead of Kenneth Gainwell. He was only behind the big 3 plus Michael Carter, so he was right there for me. I loved him. I hated the landing spot, but he is definitely showing that he may be able to just shatter that landing spot and might be able to take over from A.J. Dillon because, like you said, he had a really good preseason. He can work in the passing game. He can work in between the tackles. He can work going on the outside zone runs. He can do a lot of things right. One of the things I hated about his game was his vision, because if you were ever to watch some film of his games, his vision was pretty rugged. He ran into the back of his defensive line a lot, but he's like a pinball, man. He just bounces off and tried to find the next hole and tried to keep going. I loved Kylan Hill. So to anyone who drafted him and stashed him, he could end up being a really, really good move because he's probably cheaper than A.J. Dillon from a contract perspective. So if they need to end up cutting Dillon at some point or moving on from Dillon, or thinking that Dillon is a lot, in my opinion, he's a lot like Aaron Jones. He's not like the Jamal Williams when you guys said Jamal Williams. Kylan Hill strikes me more as a Jamal Williams type. So it'll be interesting to see what breaks down there. But to anyone who got Kylan Hill, I envy you guys. I hated the landing spot, so I did not draft him anywhere in rookie drafts, and I hate myself for it because I loved him through the draft process.
I was just hoping. I went through all my dynasty rosters, like just hoping that maybe he was available in one of them. This was a couple of weeks ago after the first preseason game, and no, no luck.
Even if you had 3-round rookie drafts, he was likely going right at the end or the first waiver wire opportunity. People were probably grabbing him just in case Aaron Jones gets hurt or A.J. Dillon gets hurt or a situation like that. Next up, we'll head over to Chicago. Tariq Cohen went down. Today it was revealed he's on the PUP list, so that's at least 6 weeks he'll be out. And David Montgomery literally took all his work, almost literally all of it, rushing, receiving, and ended up going off and having a monster season in 2020, finishing 4th in PPR, 8th in PPR per game. Yes, a lot of his success came against weak defenses, but is this not what you want and expect from your running backs to succeed against the weak defenses? And I hate to open up the can of worms, but go look at Jonathan Taylor and where he succeeded last season. Many say David Montgomery can't repeat last year and point to Damien Williams potentially taking on the Cohen role. What are your expectations for this backfield? Does Fields coming in at QB with his mobility at some point intrigue you more in Montgomery, especially at an ADP of RB22?
Yeah, Montgomery's been rising for me all offseason, all summer. So you rewind back to we first started looking at things back in April and May or whatever, and I was way down on Montgomery because I thought that Tariq Cohen was going to be back and healthy and ready. And like you said, that's really what opened the door to Montgomery being dominant. Cohen working in the passing game and getting his targets and his touches. Being on the PUP, I mean, that's definitely not going to be a thing for at least a while. So Montgomery should be able to get off to a good start and get that passing work. He showed last year that he was capable of it. Damien Williams doesn't really worry me. I think he'll get mixed in a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be taking a massive chunk away from Montgomery. Going at RB22, I think he's definitely one of the guys that could definitely go and outperform that. Justin Fields taking over, I think that makes it even better because in theory, the offense is going to be better and you want your running back to be on a good offense. I don't think you need to worry about him taking away carries. And Justin Fields is one of those guys that he can run the ball, but I don't think they're designing a lot of plays where he's schemed to run the ball.
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as a Lamar Jackson who's going to go off for 150 carries, or a Kyler Murray who goes off for 150-ish carries and 1,000 yards and stealing some of the important red zone work and stuff. I just don't picture Justin Fields being like that, or that Matt Nagy schemes him that way. But yeah, like definitely you face less stacked boxes because you have a more effective quarterback. They have to potentially have a spy on Justin Fields and waste a player. Not really, well, not waste a player, but you suddenly have a player taken away from being able to stop David Montgomery and stuff. And I mean, all the hype through the preseason and through training camp has been David Montgomery's going to get the work. He's going to continue to get the workload. He's going to continue to see the workload. And when you look at where he's going, I know that he's like kind of ish in the running back dead zone, but like you could do worse. I feel like Miles Sanders is in a worse situation. I feel like Chase Edmonds is in a worse situation. I feel like there's a lot of guys going in a similar range who have it a lot tougher than David Montgomery, and it seems like more of an uphill battle. Whereas for David Montgomery, I don't think it's an uphill battle for him to see the work and to have repeat success. Although that friendly of a schedule where you can go 5 straight weeks of pumping out like 25 plus points like he did, maybe you won't see that. You might see a little more volatility in when he has those boom weeks, but there's no reason he can't play even in your flex spot in tougher matchups. So
yeah, I agree with all of that. Like I'm surprised how careful drafters have been, or how much weight they've put on that end of season schedule. It seems like usually you see a finish like that and he gets just vaulted up the ranks or up the ADP the next season. And it's like he's slowly crawling up draft boards. But yeah, I think he should be going a little bit ahead of where he is right now. Like you said, the running back dead zone, sure, he's part of that. But if he is, he's the top of that. Like he's one of the guys you want from there.
Absolutely. Next up, we're going on to Minnesota. If you've ever listened to this show before, you know that we've been pretty tough on Dalvin Cook. He doesn't receive the same injury discount so many running backs and players in general, fantasy players in general get. He's currently going as the RB4 and has yet to complete a season in the NFL. We now move to add an additional game. Now, I will be the devil's advocate in this situation. He did finish RB2 and 6 in the last 2 seasons. He just eclipsed 300 rush attempts after a season of 250 plus, and add on 50 plus targets and 10 plus TDs in those last 2 seasons. And you can see the intrigue. In 2020, he finished as an RB2 or better in all 14 games, including 10 games as an RB1. Where do you stand on Cook? Are you investing as a top 5 running back, or are you one like me and Jim who are incorporating the discount and avoiding him? And then what about Alexander Madison? He remains dirt cheap, but beyond praying for those injuries, in 21 of 26 career games, he's had 10 or less points.
Yeah, so investing a top 5 running back, that's tough. Like you said, you laid it out. He's got a lot of those injuries, and you're not getting that injury discount. He gets that's part of the thing too. He gets all that volume, which is great, but it does grind on somebody. So I'm not worried about him if I'm drafting for this year or if I've got him for this year. But if he's on my dynasty roster, this is probably the time where you start to put feelers out there and see what you can get, because more than likely his price or his value is not going to be going up. It's probably about as capped as it could possibly get right now, as this is going to be his 5th season, 5th or 6th season in the NFL. I think it's 5th.
Yeah, it's his 5th. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, that's right around the time. I know he got another contract, but at this point, he's probably not going to be gaining value. So last season might have been the best season he ever has. That would not be surprising in the least.
And when you look at like Derrick Henry, people are like, whoa, he has to regress. He has to regress. Well, Dalvin Cook has to get hurt. It's in his nature that he's going to get hurt. He's going to miss games, and you're investing top 5 capital. Instead of some people taking Alvin Kamara, they're taking Dalvin Cook. Instead of some people taking Jonathan Taylor, they're taking Dalvin Cook. Like, I'd even take Najee Harris, and he hasn't even took a snap. I would rather go that direction.
Yep.
But we've also been extremely hard on him in this show. But like, if you're going to give the injury or regression discount to some of these players, I feel like it's only fair just because of the volume on Dalvin Cook. That would be more the reason to consider, if he's going top 5, maybe 6 to 10 is a better range, but you obviously know you won't get him there.
Right. Yeah. And then as far as Alexander Madison goes, he is just the picture of a backup that's great if Cook goes down, but it seems like they aren't super interested in getting him involved without Cook. So Madison's the guy that I don't really have any interest in.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more on there. I think that there's other people down there at his ADP where you can probably take the shot at them, where they might actually get an opportunity, not reliant upon injury. The final stop, of course, Detroit. Again, Swift has suffered through a pretty polarizing offseason, booming with the departure of AP and incoming a new coaching staff, dropping because of Williams' arrival, booming because of Twitter hype and the crazy workload he could get, and finally hitting another low with his injury concerns, which Dan Campbell has kind of alluded to. They may have to be careful with him early on. Swift had a nice 2020 despite just over 100 rush attempts and just over 50 targets. He finished as the RB17 and proved fully capable of being an RB worthy of much more work, including an impressive 1.11 fantasy points per opportunity, which ranked 4th among RBs. He does cost you a pretty penny of RB7. Are you all in on Swift like some people? Williams is going RB50, and despite playing behind Aaron Jones the last 2 seasons, received over 100 carries, over 30 targets, and produced over 700 all-purpose yards in those 2 seasons. Could he be an intriguing RB2 over others in that ADP range, considering he's been better than RB40 in 3 of the last 4 seasons? The lines have been terrible with running backs in game script. I see no reason to believe that that's changing.
Yeah, I am. I'm not investing in Swift, especially with the new coaching staff being Dan Campbell. Like, that's not an exciting hire, and he's brand new. So basically, you'd think that Swift's career might be, or his prime is going to be during this Campbell coaching era, however long that goes. The one thing that's intriguing with me about Swift is the role in the passing game. Jared Goff's going to have to throw to somebody, and that's going to be a safety check down that I think he has available. So I could see Swift being one of the top 5, top 4 most targeted running backs in the NFL if he can get on or stay on the field, be healthy. But the Detroit offense, the presence of Jamal Williams, it's really got me off Swift. He's not somebody that I'm excited to have. I think you said RB7 right now. That's more than I want to put into a Detroit running back.
Yeah, definitely. I can agree there. At this point, if you're stuck drafting him, I mean, you could draft him, but he's also going in a similar range to a guy like Antonio Gibson, who has a bit more intrigue. And like you said, Jamal Williams is there. And I'm not going to say that, Jamal Williams is taking a ton of work, but we haven't seen DeAndre Swift with a lot of work, unlike some of these other people like other running backs like Jonathan Taylor. And we've seen him do things with a lot more work. We only have a very small sample size with DeAndre Swift. Although I love his ability to do it all, I'm just so skeptical. I continue to remain skeptical, especially about the landing spot versus like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who comes at a better discount. Jonathan Taylor, you have to pay a bit more for, but you can be a lot more opportunistic with the Carson Wentz in town, the offensive line and stuff. I just can be a little more intrigued. I can be a little more invested in those situations, in the Detroit situation. And when you think about a running back being in a situation where there's a rebuild for at least 2 more years, that doesn't normally spell good for a running back. I feel like that's not talked about enough. The fact that this running back is stuck in a rebuild for at least 2 more seasons, which takes him almost to what he's going to be 25, 26 years old by that time. So then you're sitting there and you're like, well, now what?
Yeah, you want to get your running back who is at the end of a rebuild. Like, I want the guy the Dolphins draft next year, whoever that is, because they're in the middle of their rebuild right now. Thought they'd get a running back this year, and they didn't. So if the rebuild goes like they wanted to in Miami, they are a good team, and they have draft picks next year and take a stud running back early, like that's the kind of guy I want to invest in. Not the guy that's on Detroit with Dan Campbell. And who knows, like we don't know. He's got an NFL job. Maybe he does better than we expect. But it sure doesn't seem like like that's the likely thing to happen. I think they kind of want this to be like the old days with Kamara and Mark Ingram. Like I think that's the idea they have in their head with their running backs. Like pretty solid split, both getting usage, both being productive. I just don't think they can actually both, well, not to that level, but even being productive to where you have to go to draft them right now or to acquire them. I'm not sure it's worth for either of them.
Definitely. No, I can see that. And based on some of Dan Campbell's comments, I can understand why people might think that about the running backs there. So fool's gold time. I'll let you start off with it, Aaron. Give us your gold and give us your fool's gold.
Yep. So the gold, I'm going to go actually with David Montgomery on this. Like I kind of alluded to, I think he has got the best chance of this group to outperform his ADP or his current value. It would not be shocking if he was a top 12 running back by the end of the season. And he might not put up a lot of top 5 weekly finishes, but I think his volume is going to be there. I think he'll keep catching passes, and I think he's going to be consistent as long as, like everybody, as long as you're healthy. So he is definitely my gold pick, the guy I think will outperform where he's going. As far as fool's gold, we just talked about him, Swift. I don't trust the Lions. I don't trust that he's already injured or he's dealing with an injury right now. He was sidelined a lot last year. Just bad vibes from Swift.
For me, I definitely agree with you on David Montgomery. Couldn't agree more. You make the points I would make. He's definitely got the best chance and opportunity to outperform my fool's gold. And I'm going to stick to the Gold Jacket podcast way and go Dalvin Cook. I think people are going to say, I'm going to ride this till the wheels fall off, and they don't realize how bad they're going to fall off when they do fall off. One of these injuries is bound to eventually be major. We're not talking he plays 14 games, he plays 13 games, he plays 12 games. Eventually, he's bound to self-destruct. And that is something that I would not be prepared to invest in at my RB4. 20, I think he's 25 going on 26 years old. If he's not already 26 years old, sorry, but I'm not going there with Dalvin Cook at all. We'll move into the wide receivers, but before we move into the wide receivers, this would be the time where Jim usually gives a nice soliloquy to family and references our sponsor, Viridian Global. Viridian Global, I'll make it short and sweet. Check them out, viridianglobal.com, at Viridian Global on Twitter. It is where you can find all the gear that the podcast wear. Wearing one of the shirts tonight proudly for the True North Fantasy Football crew. So check it out there. They are growing such a great community and so many great shirts and 3/4 length shirts and hats. And there's just so much that they're producing for people. So definitely go check them out. And Jim, hopefully we'll.
Yep. I didn't even know they were going to be part of this, but this hat's from Viridian Global. One of my guys I write with the fantasy footballers, Jeff Greenwood, his hat. So
love it. Even better. I didn't even realize it was one, but that is how much gear they have. That's how many brands they have on there. So we love Will over there at Viridian Global. So keep supporting them where you can. Into the wide receivers we go. Green Bay, I think, can be one of the shortest and sweetest things we talk about because it's Davante Adams. It's all Davante Adams. It's all about Davante Adams. The fact that Green Bay will not acknowledge DeAndre Hopkins' contract in their negotiations is absolutely absurd and just plain downright disrespectful. His PPR per game rank has been top 5 over the last 3 straight seasons, including 2 seasons as the wide receiver one. Although he has missed time due to injury and hasn't played a 16-game season since 2016, his per-game output is absolute money. He owns target market share in Green Bay, 29% or better in the last 3 straight seasons. Is there any wide receiver you'd want to own outside of Davante Adams in Green Bay? I referenced ESB. He is cut. MVS is still in the picture, but struggling. Cobb is back at the demand of Aaron Rodgers, but isn't getting any younger. And Amari Rogers is in the picture as well.
Yeah, so of all those secondary guys you mentioned, the one that really piques my interest the most is Amari Rogers. I think he kind of took a hit when Cobb came to town, right? But Rogers is that electric playmaking type guy that they can scheme things for, kind of get him on the field. He's not going to be a full-time player right now by any means, but just the ability that he brings, I think, is something that could turn into something else. He returns kicks too, and a lot of times you see these kick returners in future years start taking over more and more and more and getting used more as a receiver. So I don't think he's going to be like somebody you can trust this year, but I think he's going to make a name for himself, and I think in future years he could be a pretty exciting name to have.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree on that front. Like you said, he did take a hit with Randall Cobb, and I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to spitefully use Cobb over Amari Rogers. But if you show a bit of patience with Amari Rogers, there definitely could be some payoff. But we don't know what the quarterback situation looks like. There's a lot of question marks. Devontae Adams luckily hasn't signed a contract, which I wouldn't, with the disrespect that Green Bay threw him. So who knows where he'll be. But I know that some people kind of like to tether him to Aaron Rodgers and be like, oh, it's because of Aaron Rodgers. No. This man, Devontae Adams, he is a stud. He is an animal. And Green Bay would just be at the mercy of so many other teams if they actually let him go.
I think a few years ago, whenever Rodgers was out for that extended time, Devontae Adams was still fine with Brett Hundley at quarterback. Like, his fantasy numbers were still solid.
Exactly. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. We're moving to Chicago next. Despite the sheer hate and disdain that most have for Matt Nagy, there seems to be a formidable 1-2 punch emerging in Chicago. Allen Robinson's been a top 10 wide receiver for 2 straight seasons, catching balls from Mitchell Trubisky, seeing over 150 targets in back-to-back seasons, over 1,100 yards, and 6+ touchdowns. Darnell Mooney emerged as a rookie last season with his crazy sub 4.4 speed. He got 98 targets and 631 yards. His catchable target rate did rank 72nd among wide receivers, but his air yards ranked 29th. So imagine if there was a few more catchable targets in this picture. Seems like competent QB play is the name of the game for Robinson, who doesn't even know what that is, and Mooney, who would like to have the ball dropped in the breadbasket once in a while. Robinson can be drafted currently as a wide receiver 16, and despite the Darnell Mooney hype, he's currently going in the wide receiver 50 range. What's your take on the Chicago Bears wide receiving situation?
Man, I did not realize Mooney was still that far down.
That's year to date. So obviously, I think if I shrunk it up to like the last 4 weeks, he's probably, at least in the 30 range.
Yeah.
But
I get it too, because I was very slow to get on the Mooney train. Like, he's this fast guy, sure, late round pick, whatever. But I mean, I'm sure you've seen the highlights of him just breaking a DB's ankles and coming open and ball sailing nowhere near him. So I'm starting to get on board that a little bit. But I mean, Robinson is just so impressive with what he has done with his career so far. Like, he is one of the safest, most trustable guys or receivers you can have with the quarterback play that he's had. Going back to what you said about Devontae Adams, like, Allen Robinson might be Devontae Adams with bad quarterbacks, right? So that he can play with anybody. Imagine if if Justin Fields is that guy. So Robinson is a guy I'm still investing in, and Mooney is a guy that has definitely piqued my interest recently.
Absolutely. I mean, like Darnell Mooney, he's sub 4.4 speed. And like you look at sub 4.4 speed guys like Henry Ruggs. Henry Ruggs is just fast. He's flat out fast. He can run, but I've watched passes sail over his head because he doesn't have the catch radius. And that's just all it is. Darnell Mooney can do a lot. He's got a decent catch radius. He can beat people early on in the route. There's so much to love about Darnell Mooney. And like I said, I'm sure the price has gone up. If you're talking to Darnell Mooney owners, it's a pretty costly venture. If you're drafting now in a startup, it's likely more that you're getting them in like the wide receiver 25 to 36 range. But I mean, There's no reason not to invest there still, because if Justin Fields starts playing, he can absolutely sustain 2 wide receivers, especially a guy like Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson, I find comparable to Keenan Allen. Year over year, people continue to draft them outside of where they constantly are performing above that ADP threshold. And then they sit there and they're like, I don't know why I didn't take him, or I don't understand why I didn't invest there. Year over year, same situation. Allen Robinson is exempt from the excuse of his quarterback situation. I think we can finally agree on that. There is no more using that as an excuse whatsoever.
Definitely.
Minnesota, although Kirk Cousins may not get you excited as a QB1, maybe even not as a QB2, his wide receivers certainly are assets, as we alluded to earlier. Justin Jefferson exploded onto the scene last year, and same with his ADP. He's year to date the wide receiver 1, going number 1 off the board as a wide receiver after his wide receiver 6 season. He had 125 targets, 1,400 yards, and 7 TDs last season. However, he does present some sort of volatility, finishing as a wide receiver 3 or worse 50% of the time, including 6 times scoring less than 10 points. Adam Thielen was a red zone machine, dropping 14 TDs in 2020 and producing 105 PPR points inside the 20. That's 41% of his fantasy points. Are you willing to invest the capital or high-end 19th overall pick in Justin Jefferson? And can Thielen be a value even with a likely regression in his red zone work and touchdowns in 2021, being drafted currently as the wide receiver 42?
Yeah, so these are 2 receivers that I am not very high on for 2 totally different reasons. Jefferson, don't get me wrong. I mean, you said all the numbers. He had literally probably the best rookie receiver season of all time. That being said, that's why he is where he's at right now. Like, this is as high as his value is ever going to be. And maybe he puts up a couple more seasons like this in the future that are comparable. We talked about it earlier too. Like, we don't know for sure what the quarterback future really is there. Even with Kirk Cousins, it's not the ideal situation. So don't get me wrong. I'm not avoiding Justin Jefferson. That would be ridiculous. But I also don't want to put him as, like, I would take CeeDee Lamb in a startup over Jefferson. I just think that CeeDee Lamb is that guy, and it's close. But yeah, that's why I'm not having a lot of Justin Jefferson stock right now. As far as Thielen, that's exactly what you talked about, the touchdown regression. Like, if he's not getting double-digit touchdowns, he's not going to return value, and that's just hard to bank on year to year. He is getting up there in his 30s now. So both guys I'm not huge on. I mean, I'm like I said, I love Jefferson, but just the current price is more than I want to put up.
Yeah, I mean, you think people are drafting him enough that his current ADP is wide receiver number 1. Yeah. We talk Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins. We talk all these names that you're going to go over after what Calvin Ridley after 1 season. We are talking to all these names, and you're willing to invest there. And we talked about the uncertainty at the quarterback position. We talked about, like, how could a major Dalvin Cook injury shift the complete landscape of how they play football in Minnesota. I'm sorry, I understand there's uncertainty anywhere as you go. Tyreek Hill is my dynasty wide receiver number 1. Justin Jefferson, I don't think I even have in my top 5.
Yep, don't disagree.
It's pretty easy to see at this point. Yes, his value is sky high. There's no way you're getting it any higher. Adam Thielen, you can expect regression, but I still expect him to be a wide receiver 3. I expect him to still land in the top 36 in redraft and for the next maybe couple of seasons. As long as Kirk Cousins is in town and tight end situations. I mean, they picked up Chris Herndon today, but Irv Smith Jr. is injured. Like, let's not pretend the ghost of Chris Herndon suddenly going to become a fantasy asset again. Like, in a spot where they split very evenly between 2 tight ends generally based on the Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. history of the last couple seasons. So, I mean, I think Thielen can still be a red zone weapon. He can still be an asset. He can still outperform his ADP and return some value for you. it's tough to know when those spike weeks are going to be. Same with Justin Jefferson. If those spike weeks are, I'm going to give you 4, 5, 6 really good weeks, but I'm going to give you 6 duds, that's not wide receiver 1. I'm sorry. That's not the wide receiver 1. I need consistency there to draft him as such.
Yep, definitely agree.
Next stop and final stop should be pretty short and sweet because it is Detroit, and we kind of alluded to it. The Lions wide receivers are just not good, but the opportunity and potential value is interesting to say the least. The game script will be a major negative, which means the 581 pass attempts could grow in 2021. The first Lion off the board at wide receiver is Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 55 in startups. He will be a rookie this season. The next one off the board, Quintez Cephas, wide receiver 81. He's in his second season. And as you alluded to, Brashad Perryman has been cut. Is there a value to be had among Detroit wide receivers who are going practically free, practically as your wide receiver 5, 6, 7, 8 off the board? Their wide receiver 1 on the depth chart, Tyrell Williams, not even being drafted in the first 90 wide receivers.
Yeah. So if you just need a guy that's going to be on the field, like I'm cool taking Tyrell Williams for absolutely free. Like that's okay. He's going to be out there. So just bye-week replacement type guy, but I'm not targeting him. From a long-term perspective, Amon-Ra St. Brown could be that guy. You got to wonder what the future is going to be. And it might be great because, like I said before, too, I don't think that Jared Goff's the long-term option there. So Amon-Ra could be that kind of go-to PPR safety blanket for somebody in the future. As a rookie, it's hard to trust. And, there wasn't a ton of draft capital put into him. And I actually do. I have a little glimmer of hope for Quintez Cephas. And maybe it's because I am here in Wisconsin and watched him play college football. And he made a lot of ridiculous catches. So I'm not sure he can ever be a guy you can count on, but I'm cheering for him.
I mean, if you think that they had 581 pass attempts last season and with an even more negative game script, we could see them push 600, there's no reason to believe there's a couple guys in that room that are getting 100 targets. Yeah. Even TJ Hawkinson. Like I've said it before, where is it? I can't remember where I make the comparison. Oh, Atlanta. You are not going to see, as much as we dream of, you're not going to see Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley get 200 targets. And this team throws the ball immensely, over 600 times, I think, over the last 2 seasons. You are not going to see those two get that many targets as much as you wish and want it. Same situation here. There's a lot of opportunity to look out for. And the younger, the better. So Tyrell Williams, sure, grab him if you want him just to see what happens, but his injury history doesn't play well to his favor. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Quintez Cephas, the fact that Brashad Perryman's out of the picture paints them in a much brighter picture than they originally were with Brashad Perryman in the picture. So at that price, you're literally drafting some teams' wide receivers 4s, 5s. You might as well go and take the shot at some of these guys.
Yeah, they're going to get their chances on the field. They're going to get the shot.
They are potentially wide receiver 1 and 2s on their team, and you're going to take a shot on a rookie who's 5th on the depth chart instead. Don't lie to yourself. That's for sure. So gold and fool's gold. For me, the gold has to be, I want to say Devontae Adams, but I'm going to say Allen Robinson because the value on Allen Robinson is just too real. The fact that he's still going as a wide receiver 16 just blows my mind. And the minute Justin Fields steps on that field, he is, even with Andy Dalton, he's exceeding because Andy Dalton's better than most of the QBs he's had. The minute Justin Fields steps on that field, this man is a top 10, top 5 potential quarterback for the next, hopefully he stays. If Justin Fields comes out there, performs, he likes the situation, hopefully he stays. And then he will perform exceedingly well. I think top 10 at least, maybe potentially top 5 if he sees the continued 150 target seasons. Fool's gold for me is Justin Jefferson. There's no goddamn way this guy's going to be the wide receiver 1, the number 1 wide receiver in the entire NFL. I don't think he ever will be. Hot take or not, I don't think he will ever be the wide receiver 1. Plain and simple.
Yeah. So as far as gold, I'm going to go right along with you there with Robinson. I mean, you laid it out, Mr. Consistency. Still probably haven't seen his ceiling with a good quarterback. So great call there. With my fool's gold, again, I don't disagree with you on Jefferson, but just to have a little bit different, I'm going to stay in Minnesota, but go with Thielen. I think he's near the end. I don't think double-digit touchdowns are, going to be a regular thing for him anymore. Maybe he's got a year or two of usability left, but I think we're going to see the downward trajectory starting this year.
Definitely. Absolutely. And final stop, the least important by most accounts, and we'll try and make it quick as we pass over an hour. We usually go for quite a while with these, but we'll try and make it quick for you guys. We'll start in Green Bay, the tight ends. Tight end is a position where outside the top three, arguably now four, there is a constant flux and change happening. Robert Tonyan was one of a couple of these new tight ends to emerge in 2020. He was the tight end 5 last season, needing only 59 targets to get 586 yards and a whopping 11 touchdowns. Last year was historic for Green Bay from a touchdown standpoint, as we touched on, and his touchdowns led all tight ends, while his yards, air yards, and receptions were all ranked around 12th or 13th. He also saw an absurd 89.8% catchable target rate, only 6 targets deemed uncatchable. It feels like a lot was working in his favor with Rogers in town, knowing this could be the last dance, knowing in general just the outlier of the season last year. Would you be putting top 10 tight end ADP into Tonyan like we're seeing right now?
I think top 10 is right about where it should be. Maybe it's a little bit steep, but so his season was just ridiculous as far as efficiency goes, right? And there's 2 ways to look at that. Like, I think he's got room to grow, right? 59 targets is not very much. And we talked about after Devontae Adams, there is no defined number 2. So he's got some room to grow there. Where he doesn't really have much room to grow is that 11 touchdowns, right? Like, that's probably not going to be happening with any kind of consistency. It might not ever happen again with him. Then the fact that, as we keep alluding to this possible last dance, we don't know what Rodgers' future is. So if we're just talking about this season, yeah, I've got him inside my top 10. But long term, maybe 11 or 12. Like, he's a young guy, and maybe Jordan Love is going to be a good quarterback that can keep him relevant. But there's just a lot of unknown there after this year.
Definitely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more on the situation. I just know that there's constant flux and change, and he's going, I think, in the ballpark of 9, 10, 8, 9, 10. I think I could just wait. At that point, I could probably, pad my wide receiver depth and just keep moving on and wait for something later on down the road. Zach Ertz, Anthony Firks, or certain types of other situations where there's opportunity and where, Ertz could go off and be a tight end 1 elsewhere. Firks is a tight end 1 and one of the only tight ends in Tennessee and stuff. I think I'd probably just wait and pad some of the positions I already have.
Yeah, and you can even take multiple shots late, and one of them is going to be relevant.
Exactly. Because Robert Tonyan was not even drafted in most leagues. He was a waiver wire grab. So Chicago, pretty simple here. Bears ranked in the middle of the pack for tight end scoring last season. 7 weeks where their top tight end scored less than 10 points. Only 2 weeks where they had the boom 20-plus point week. Jimmy Graham is back, who was the top tight end for the Bears last season, finishes the tight end 14. He saw 76 targets and didn't even get over 500 yards. Cole Kmet's around, climbing draft boards a bit, who has some intrigue as a second-year tight end. Any interest in the Bears tight ends? I can keep it simple for me. No.
Yeah, I do have a little bit with Kmet, just because he's a young guy. He showed up a little bit last season. And there's the whole Justin Fields mystery. So if the chips all fall the right way, he could be a relevant tight end. He's never going to be that elite, I don't think, but he can be usable. I've got a little interest in him.
Yeah, I mean, if you draft him and you wait maybe a year or two, Jimmy Graham's out of the picture, maybe we could be talking about him as a Logan Thomas-esque, Robert Tonyan-esque type player in that Chicago Bears offense, depending on how things unfold. Minnesota. The tight end most were expecting to be that guy in 2021 is now expected to miss multiple weeks after meniscus surgery. That is Irv Smith. They have picked up the ghost of Chris Herndon. So now fantasy owners' hearts are breaking all over the place. Smith was emerging in the red zone during the preseason and preparing to eat into the Rudolph work being vacated. Now, is Conklin worth any investment? Is Herndon worth any investment? Or are you just waiting on Irv Smith to come back? Conklin was a basketball player and has a strong catch radius and did see 26 targets behind 2 other tight ends last season.
Yeah, I don't have much interest at all here. Like, even, I'll be honest, Irv Smith, I was not super high on him just because it seemed like the way the Vikings were running their team that it was kind of – so last year when Rudolph went out, I'm pretty sure Conklin and Irv Smith had like almost identical numbers. So what's to say it's going to be any different now, with Rudolph gone? Herndon's a little interesting just because he's Herndon, but I mean, if you can get him off the waivers and you need a guy, take a shot, see what happens. But no real interest here on this team.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I can't remember the numbers right off the top of my head, but they were like within, I think, 2 PPR points of each other in those 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I think 4 weeks it was when it happened, because they each had 2 weeks as a tight end one on the team. Yeah. So definitely it's a weird situation. And to think that Irv Smith was going to step out of the shadow and emerge more, he was going pretty rich when the opportunity was there for people. The final one, the most interesting one to talk about and wrap the show up with, is TJ Hawkinson. He's one of the tight ends being talked about big time this offseason as he enters the all-important 3rd season for a tight end. He's got a huge opportunity with an absolutely terrible wide receiving core that we talked about earlier. He's going with an ADP of tight end 5 or 6, and he's fresh off his first 100-target season. He was top 5 in targets, receptions, yards, and yards after the catch. Do you buy Hawk as a safe option if you miss on one of the big 4? I call it big 4 now because I think it's pretty safe to say Pitts is there, at least from an ADP perspective. Opportunity is knocking. He boomed earlier than his 3rd season. Now he's almost a value given that he falls down the list due to Pitts in the big 3.
Yeah, I'm great with him at tight end 5. Like, I really do think that 3rd-year tight end breakout that we've seen in the past is coming for him. We talked about the opportunity he's got, right? Detroit. I actually do have this one memorized. It was like 64% of their targets from last year just gone. So he had, I think you said 59 targets and 101 targets. It would not shock me to see him with 130 targets this year, right? 17-game season. And he's good. We talk about how high Kyle Pitts was drafted, which was, the record and everything, but Hawkinson was a top 10 pick. Like, there is a talent there, there's an investment there, and there's opportunity there. So I am great with him at tight end 5. I think that within the next couple of years, as some of these elite guys start aging out, that he's going to keep ascending up this tight end list.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Kittle, he's got his injury history. You look at Kelsey, he's 33, I believe. You look at Darren Waller, he's entering into his 30s. Obviously, tight ends, you are less concerned than a running back, likely less concerned than a wide receiver, although they still take a beating. They still have to block. They're still right down there in the thick of things, pushing some of those big bodies around. So it is tough to say, but man, I love TJ Hawkinson too. I mean, at that value, like, you got some people taking Dallas Goedert over him. I mean, I'm an Eagles fan and I take TJ Hawkinson all day, every day, for sure in that situation. So, I mean, there's not enough good we can say about TJ Hawkinson. It's the all-important 3rd year, and he already started to emerge big time last season, and the opportunity just absolutely blew up this season. I could see 125 plus targets with ease for TJ Hawkinson this season. And people are all about the big 4. So I'd let people trip over each other for the big 4. And then I'd be waiting there to grab TJ Hawkinson because he's young too. I think he's only 24. So He's still young too. Gold, fool's gold. I think this might be pretty simple for us here, but I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah. So with gold, I mean, we just got done gushing over him, TJ Hawkinson, everything we just laid out. Like I said, I think he'll be ascending the ranks over the next couple seasons. So fool's gold, it not just because of the injury. If it wasn't for that, even Irv Smith would have been my fool's gold. Just the system. I mean, he's fine, but I was not buying that hype all season. So even without the health injury risks that he's got now, I'm going to stay Irv Smith fool's gold.
Yeah, TJ Hawkinson for sure. Don't even have to add to that. My fool's gold is going to be Robert Tonyan. People are drafting this guy like he's a top 10 tight end, and he's also one of those guys who could be in flux and just as easily be booted out of the top 10. He could end up in the top 10, but I don't think that there's certain consistency that he can stay up there, especially how dependent he was on touchdowns. If you're in a PPR standard league where 6 points for a touchdown, that man had 66 points come from his touchdowns alone. And that's a lot of investment to have just in your touchdowns alone. So I'm going with that one there.
That makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. So yeah, this was an awesome time, Aaron. I got to thank you so much for coming on. I got to shout out the listeners and the watchers for all of your support. Sorry that Jim couldn't be here tonight, but he will try his very best to be here next week when we break down our top 12 rankings at each position. Make sure to rate, review, like, subscribe wherever you listen or watch to help us out. Thank you so much for, again, Aaron, member of Team Rise or Fall, Fantasy Pros, the Fantasy Footballers. You can find Aaron on Twitter at AA Larson. Any parting words for the viewers? Anything exciting you're working on that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, it's been awesome being here. With the season, just about ready to kick off. What I do with the Ballers in season is each week I write a target report article, and there's numbers involved, obviously, but it's not just blind numbers. It's sort of like looking at the opportunities from week to week and seeing where the trends are going as far as who's getting more opportunities. So that's my weekly thing there. Team Rise or Fall, they are more DFS oriented stuff. So I do some stacking and Yahoo picks with them.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And we'll definitely be looking out for your work, Aaron. And of course, make sure to check me out on Twitter at Connor10. I also run the True North Fantasy Football Twitter as well. So most of the content there is coming out, is me rolling that out. And some big things coming at True North Fantasy Football this season and probably before the season starts. So definitely keep your eyes out. And of course, follow Jim at Gold Jacket QBs. He is heartbroken that he couldn't be here, and I'm certain he'll be back next week. And also, check out the True North Fantasy Football crew, TrueNorthFFB.com, at TrueNorthFFB on Twitter, the TNFF Network on YouTube. Make sure to hit subscribe. And of course, True North FFB on Instagram as well. This has been awesome, and we'll see you all next Tuesday.